Okay, so now we're going to move on to the medical model. So the medical model is what we had ascribed to for decades and what oftentimes people still do. So the medical model, as you can see, the word medical comes from the field of medicine, which it's really about finding the problem within the person and diagnosing the problem and then treating the problem accordingly. That's the medical model. So the medical model was applied to various elements or various individuals, various communities, various situations in society. So it says that the person is at fault. They cannot do things for themselves. The problem is within them. So they are, and I'm going to use the word that has been used in the past, they are disabled. So therefore they don't have the ability to do what needs to be done. So then we diagnose their problem. We say they are this. We put them in a box. You are a blind person, you are a deaf person, you are a disabled person, whatever the case is. And all focus is in place on that barrier or challenge. And there's only focus on what the person can't do. There's lots of test probing and sorry, I'd say put the word probing there twice. Lots of probing. There's a little respect, especially in the past for the person's humanity. They put in a mental institution. There's loss of decision making. They don't have any independence. They have no ability to make decisions for themselves. Other people are forced, not I wouldn't say forced, they are forced to give their decision making ability over to other people. So there's forced segregation. They put in different schools, they have different services, different everything that they have to use. Everything is different for them. And it's a dehumanizing thing because often in spaces, especially in decades past, if you were to go to a mall, if you were to go to a public area, there was no ramp at every door. The ramps were at a specific door, sometimes right at the back of the building, sometimes far away from where the person needed to be. So the person had to be separated from the others, and they had to then go and find out how to accommodate their own needs. And so it was very difficult. They weren't seen as emotional beings. They weren't seen as people that have abilities, that have cognitive or intellectual abilities, have physical needs. They don't consider their sexual needs. They don't consider the financial contributions that they could make or that the needs that they do have. And so they were just kind of made as I'm saying. And I'm speaking specifically and purposefully in this way because I want to really set the stage of how we've looked at people with different abilities, excluded from society. And then they later then put into two categories. Either they can be included if they are quote unquote normal enough, and so if they seem to fit in, if they seem to be able to fit into society's expectations of them, they're okay and they can go and join society as normal, or they're excluded and marginalized permanently, as I said, in institutions, in different schools, not in social settings, not in community, not accommodated for. So the medical model was, as you can see, very difficult on people with different abilities. Those people were seen as the problem, as if they were the ones that almost created their own situation. And they weren't accommodated for in ways that made their life easier or made them included in society and community. So opposite to the social model is what we moved to the social model from the medical model. We're still trying to. The person, I don't like the word victim, but I'm going to use it in this context. The person is seen as a victim of social prejudice. So social prejudice actually makes the person differently abled. Because we don't accept the person for who they are, we don't accommodate the person for who they are, and therefore they cannot do what everyone else can do. For example, we do not accommodate for them in the classroom space, and therefore they cannot use the school, they cannot access the education at the school because they're not accommodated for. So who is really the one preventing the education from happening? The person with a different ability or the school that doesn't accommodate the person? So it's a whole mindset shift. You really need to think about it. So the social model, the child is at the center of all that we do, and we value the child. We value their difference. We value them as a human being, that they can contribute to society in different ways. The person is seen as being affected by social prejudice. Society has the responsibility to eliminate barriers. So the barriers could be the fact that there's no ramp to the mall. So that is a barrier. So this is society is responsible for eliminating the barrier, not the person. The person should be accommodated for. In the social model, the child has a say in their lives, and they, along with others, has a voice in identifying their strengths and weaknesses. So no one just makes decisions for them. They're not powerless. They're not just pushed and pulled from one place to another, but they are seen and respected as an individual with their own thoughts and feelings. The school system is resourced to accommodate the child, and the child is not expected to fit in. Apologies for any noise in the background. The video picks up all the sounds in the environment. But as I was saying, so the child is not expected to fit in. You don't expect the child to change. You don't expect the child to have to do certain things to be able to access the education system. But the education system, the school system, needs to accommodate the child where the child is at and provide the resources that the child needs. So in this spirit, teachers, parents, and community members upskill themselves and train themselves to learn how to accommodate learners with differences and people with differences. Because our historical attitude to people with differences, we do need to learn how to shed that way of thinking and use different skills and use different ways of thinking, a real paradigm shift in the way we think about people, the way we think about access. It's not something that necessarily we know about because of the way we've been socialized. We've been socialized in a society that came from a history of separation, difference, keeping people in boxes. Okay, and so this model looks at relationships, and the relationships are the center of everything. We value individuals, we value relationships to each other, and we expect that those relationships will protect and provide for the individuals. Therefore, diversity is expected and accepted. When students enter, we make note of what their needs are. That is why when we go to schools now, they ask for the learner profile, because that is about accommodating the child and taking into cognizance their specific needs. So that we end up with a more accepting society. Society that welcomes diversity, it welcomes difference, and makes every child feel as if they are seen, as if they are important, as they should be. So I found this very nice infograph, and it just outlines a little bit, or rather reiterates what I've been saying. The medical model versus the social model, why it is more accepted in society, why it's more useful, why it's more important for us to use a social model as opposed to the medical model. So this is just more information for you, and there's lots of resources on the internet. Please watch videos, read information, because as a teacher that's going into this education system, and many of you are already in the education system, you need to see inclusive education as part of everything we do. It's not one module, it's not one part of education. It should be prevalent in all parts of education, and for that matter, it should be part of our society and the way we think and the way we live. Many of our faith platforms do talk about accepting people, not judging people, but understanding who they are and working with who they are as well. Just as a means of looking at all the models that exist. We obviously can't look at all, but another model that we can talk about is a charity model, one which that I think most of us have known about or been exposed to, even if we didn't know what it was called, and it's quite outdated today. And disability or differences are seen as a punishment or tragedy. People think that you're being punished, and in the old, if I can say, the older generations or older times, it was seen as a punishment, and you've been punished for something, or your parents are being punished for something, and the individual is seen as someone who's needy and pitiful, and you need to find salvation through the care of others. So this is a very outdated model. Then we have a philanthropic model as well, and this is similar to the charity model, and it is oftentimes used interchangeably, where the person is the object of charity and sympathy, and they should be pitied and given handouts and cared for in separate societies as if they cannot do anything for themselves. Quite outdated, because today we know that people with differences are able to contribute to society just as much as anybody else. A society just needs to accommodate them for their differences and not separate them because they don't fit into a box. We will now look at the biological model. So the biological model was introduced by Yuri Bronfenbrenner. So they call it Bronfenbrenner's biological model. It was created in 1917. And so essentially the biological model looks at the child's environment and how it influences the child's growth and development. So it also says people are products of their social environment, as well as not just the other aspects as well, but specifically the social aspects of the environment and how they interact together. So as you can see, in the center is the individual, the person, the child, the sex, age, health, etc. That all has an effect as well. So those are important elements and identifying elements of the child. We then move out to the microsystem. So it's important before we go forward, the Bronfenbrenner's theory, what underlies it is what we call proximal processes. So proximal processes is at its most essential and basic level, the interactions between the various elements of the environment. So that is an important tenet of the biological model. How do these elements and how do these parts of the environment interact with one another? So within the microsystem, which is your first level over here, we look at how the school, peers, the neighborhood, how all of these interact or rather impact the individuals. The closest relationships, it's the most immediate surroundings, your school, your peers, it's the most immediate surroundings, and therefore they're the most influential on you. And so the microsystem talks about how the neighborhood affects you, how your family affects you, how they are involved in your development and your growth as a person. And of course, your microsystem can affect you in a positive or negative way. Your family could be stable or unstable. These are parts in your environment that you see every day. So as you grow and develop, they become part of you consciously and unconsciously. Internalize parts of this environment. So if you, for example, are from a family or a child is from a family where there is a lot of violence, for example, they'll very often internalize this violence and either become violent themselves or have a very drastic reaction to any kind of hint of violence at all. So that is your microsystem. And your microsystem is obviously like as I said, where you are exposed to every day. It can be a protective factor, whereas you have a supportive school, supportive church group, supportive peer group, or it can be a risk factor. So either protective factor, which is the healthier possibility, or a risk factor where perhaps school is a toxic place to be, or your peers are, you're being bullied by your peers. So all of that has an impact on you as an individual. So the mesosystem that you can see over here, it's a little bit different, a little bit more difficult to explain, but it will make sense as we go through it. So the mesosystem is about the relationship that develops between one or more or two or more of these microsystems. So basically it is a system of microsystems. So this is where your school and your family interact. Is there a supportive relationship between the school and family? Does your family have a relationship with your school? Do they get involved with your school? Do they try and work together? Or is your family not really part of your school process? For example, does the family never come to the school and never get involved and never read the school letters? Is the neighborhood area that you are in affect the family because it's a violent neighborhood, for example, and so that does have an impact on the family, it has an impact on the school. So that is what the mesosystem is about. It's really about the relationships between two or more of these here within your microsystem. We'll now move on to the exosystem, and the exosystem is an element of the environment or an element of your environment, but it doesn't directly impact you, but it does have an indirect impact. So for example, it could be something like your father's workplace. It doesn't directly impact you, but indirectly there will be a reaction were your father, for example, to have to work nights or if he were to be retrenched. So it does have an impact on you. Your neighbors, the legal services, the mass media, all has an impact on you as an individual. So for example, how it can be a protective factor if your neighbors are very supportive to each other and there is a neighborhood watch, for example. I'll use that as an example. If there's a neighborhood watch, the environment feels more safe. It therefore influences your family because the children can now play outside. And because the children play outside, the families are interacting. So that's how your ecosystem, which doesn't directly, the neighborhood watch doesn't